The palace burned like a dying sun. Flames climbed the tall crystal towers, turning gold walls into black smoke. The Queen of Sarathia stood in her throne room, her silver crown falling slightly from her head. Around her, the sound of boots echoed, not her royal guards anymore, but rebels wearing her army's armor. She had ruled this world for 10 years. But tonight, everyone betrayed her. Her council had fled first. Her generals bowed to the invaders. Even her royal guards left her behind. Only one person stayed, the human. His name was Elias, a foreigner. An outsider. A soldier who once swore loyalty to a queen that never even looked at him twice. Now, as the throne room shook from explosions, Elias stepped in front of her. His armor was cracked, his weapon old, but his eyes were firm like stone. He raised his broken rifle toward the giant doors where enemy soldiers were gathering. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "they're coming." The queen turned to him, her golden eyes trembling. "You shouldn't be here, human. This isn't your war." Elias gave a small, tired smile. "I think it is now." The doors burst open. Dozens of armed rebels rushed in, shouting her name like a curse. Their leader laughed loudly. The mighty Queen of Sarathia hiding behind a human toy? Blaster shots cut through the smoke. Elias moved fast, covering her with his body. The impact of fire hit his armor, burning holes, but he didn't fall. He fired back, his bullets finding the rebels one by one. The queen watched him, the man she once called weak, fighting with the strength of 10 soldiers. "Why?" she whispered under her breath. "Why would you fight for me?" Elias didn't answer. He only shouted, "Move, Your Majesty," and pulled her behind the throne as another explosion rocked the floor. Shards of crystal rained down. The great chandelier crashed beside them. The smell of burning metal filled the air. The queen's heart raced. She could hear the rebels closing in, their boots crunching over marble and ash. The royal banners, once bright and proud, were burning. She looked at the man crouched before her, bleeding, breathing heavily yet still standing. Once, she had believed humans were a lower species, brought to Sarathia only as laborers and mercenaries. Elias had been one of the few chosen to train with her army. She had never trusted him. But now everyone she trusted was gone. The firelight painted his face red and gold. There was no fear in his eyes, only duty. He looked back at her once and said softly, "As long as I breathe, no one touches you." The queen felt something inside her, something strange, something she had buried long ago, begin to stir. Was this what loyalty truly meant? Not fear, not power, but standing your ground when all others run? Suddenly, another explosion ripped through the wall. The throne cracked. Elias grabbed her arm and pulled her to the side. "We have to move," he said. "Where?" she asked, her voice trembling. "There is nowhere left." "Then we make somewhere," he replied. They ran down the corridor, flames chasing their shadows. Behind them, the throne room collapsed completely. The queen turned for a second, watching her empire burn to the ground. Her crown fell from her head, rolling across the floor and disappearing into smoke. She whispered almost to herself, "This was my world." Elias stopped, looked at her, and said quietly, "Then let's make a new one, Majesty. But first, we survive." They entered a side hall. Statues of her ancestors lay broken, windows shattered, letting in the cold night air. The sound of distant screams echoed through the city below. Her people were turning against each other. The queen's steps grew weak. She leaned against the wall, her strength fading. "I gave them peace," she said. "I gave them everything." Elias loaded the last bullet into his rifle. Sometimes peace makes people soft. And greed eats soft hearts first. The queen looked at him with wide eyes. "You speak like a philosopher." He gave a small grin. "No, just a soldier who's seen too much." Voices approached. The rebels had found their trail again. Elias pushed open a hidden door at the end of the hall, a secret passage known only to the royal guard. He motioned for her to go inside. "Hurry." She hesitated for a moment, staring at him. "You'll die if you stay here." Elias's voice was calm. "If I die doing what's right." For the first time, the queen didn't give an order. She didn't command. She only whispered, "Don't die." He looked at her, a faint light in his tired eyes. "I'll try, Your Majesty." As she disappeared into the tunnel, Elias turned back toward the door and raised his weapon one last time. Smoke filled the hall. The rebels appeared, shouting. He stood alone between them and their queen. When they demanded his surrender, he only said 7 words. "You'll have to kill me first." The sound of gunfire echoed through the burning palace, and in the darkness below, the queen stopped walking and for the first time, prayed for a human. Smoke still filled the tunnels beneath the burning palace. The Queen of Sarathia walked in silence, her long silver gown torn, her steps unsteady. Behind her, the human's voice echoed in the darkness. "Keep moving, Your Majesty. The tunnel leads to the old city gate." Elias's arm was bleeding, his armor half melted from fire, yet he moved ahead, holding a torch in one hand and his broken rifle in the other. He never looked back. The queen wanted to speak but couldn't. She was used to giving orders, not following them, and yet, tonight she followed him. When they reached the end of the tunnel, the smell of the outside world hit them, smoke, ashes, and rain. The night sky burned red above the ruined city. The queen stared at it and whispered, "My kingdom, gone." Elias checked the horizon, scanning for movement. "They'll be hunting you. We need to stay hidden." The queen turned to him sharply. "Why do you care? You're not one of us. You could run. No one would stop you." He didn't answer. He only pointed toward the eastern ridge where the forest began. "We go there. The trees will cover us," she wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He wasn't asking permission. He was protecting her. As they ran through the ruined streets, the queen saw her people looting the city. Rebels cheered as statues of her ancestors were pulled down. Some of them laughed and wore her royal colors like trophies. She felt a knife twist in her heart. "They worshipped me once," she whispered. Elias looked at her. "They feared you." Fear never lasts long. That truth hit her harder than any weapon. She walked beside him quietly until a loud voice shouted from behind, "Stop right there!" 4 rebel soldiers appeared from the smoke, guns raised. They saw the queen's crown still hanging from her belt and grinned. "The queen herself! Look what we found!" Elias stepped in front of her instantly, gun aimed, body tense. One of the rebels laughed. "You think you can stop us, human? Drop the weapon and kneel before your betters." The queen's heart pounded. She could see Elias's hands shaking from blood loss, but he didn't drop the gun. He didn't kneel. "I don't kneel," he said calmly. The rebels fired first. Elias dropped behind a wall, returning fire with sharp precision. 2 rebels fell. The others rushed forward, shouting curses. The queen, for the first time, picked up a fallen blaster. Her hands trembled. She had never used one before. She aimed and fired. The last rebel screamed and fell. Silence followed. Only the sound of rain hitting the street. Elias turned to her, surprised. "Good shot, Your Majesty." She lowered the weapon, her eyes wide with shock. "I've never killed before." "You just saved both of us," he said softly. For a moment, the queen looked at him. Really looked. His face was pale, his arm bleeding, but his eyes burned with life. There was something pure in that defiance, something she had never seen even in her bravest generals. They reached the forest by dawn. Mist rolled between tall glowing trees. The air felt cool and quiet, hiding the chaos behind them. Elias finally sat down under a rock, breathing heavily. The queen stood over him. "You risked your life for me twice," she said slowly. "Even when I insulted your kind." Elias smiled weakly. "You did, yes. You called humans primitive beasts in front of the whole court." She lowered her head. "I did." He leaned back against the stone, closing his eyes. "I didn't care. You were right in some ways. But I also learned something. Sometimes beasts are more loyal than kings." The queen didn't know how to answer that. She sat beside him quietly, listening to the forest. For the first time in years, there were no guards, no servants, no crown, only her and a human who refused to kneel. After a while, Elias spoke again, his voice weaker. "You should go on without me." The queen turned quickly. "What do you mean?" "I'm slowing you down," he said. "My wound, it's deep. You'll move faster alone." She looked at his injured arm, then at his face. "You're not dying here. Not after saving me," he smiled faintly. "You command too much even now." "And you talk too much," she replied softly. A sudden noise cut their quiet moment. Footsteps. Dozens of them. The rebels had found the trail. Their voices echoed through the trees, angry and close. Elias tried to stand, but stumbled. The queen grabbed his arm, helping him up. "Come," she whispered. "We can still make it to the mountain caves." But Elias looked back, his eyes steady again. "If I stay behind, I can slow them down." "No," she said firmly, gripping his hand. "You will not die for me again." He looked at her hand holding his. For a second, time froze. Fire and smoke faded into silence. The queen, proud, cold, untouchable, was holding a human's hand, and in that silence he smiled again. Then let's both live, Majesty. They moved into the mist together, footsteps vanishing into the forest shadows, hunted, bleeding but unbroken. And behind them the enemy shouted her name again, this time not as a ruler, but as prey. The forest of Sarathia was silent, too silent. The mist curled around the trees like ghosts watching from afar. The queen and Elias moved slowly between glowing roots and hanging vines. Every step echoed with danger. Behind them, distant voices still hunted, rebels, trackers, and traitors who once swore loyalty to the throne. The queen's silver hair was messy, her royal gown torn and stained with dirt. The golden crest on her chest, once a symbol of power, now made her a target. Elias walked beside her, holding his broken rifle and scanning every shadow. "How far are we from the mountains?" she asked in a quiet voice. "Not far," he replied, "but this forest has old secrets. My map said there's a passage under the cliffs, something the old kings built before your time." She raised an eyebrow. "And how would a human know what my ancestors built?" He smiled faintly. "Because your ancestors forced humans to build it." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. There was truth in his words and guilt in her heart. They continued walking until the trees began to whisper with wind. Strange glowing insects buzzed around them, lighting the path like fallen stars. Elias's boots crunched softly on the moss. The queen followed close behind, holding the hem of her dress to stay silent. Then, a sound. A low growl. Not human. Elias stopped instantly, raising his weapon. The queen froze too. From the darkness, 2 red eyes appeared, then 4, then 6. Creatures of the forest, shadow wolves. Mutated beasts that fed on blood and heat. "Stay behind me," Elias whispered. The wolves stepped closer, their bodies half visible in the fog, teeth glowing faintly blue. Elias fired one shot and it missed. The wolves charged. He grabbed the queen's arm and ran. They dashed through the glowing forest as the beasts howled behind them. Branches tore her gown, dirt covered her feet, and still Elias didn't stop. "There!" he shouted, pointing ahead. A cracked stone door half buried under roots stood between 2 cliffs. Old symbols of the royal family marked the entrance. The queen's eyes widened. That's the ancient passage of Sarathia. "Then pray it still opens," he said. The wolves were close now, claws hitting the stones. Elias slammed his shoulder against the door, but it didn't move. He looked at the queen. There must be a key or mark. She pressed her palm to the royal symbol. A faint light shimmered beneath her skin, and the stone slowly split open with a heavy rumble. "Go!" Elias yelled. They rushed inside as the first wolf leaped, its claws scraping the stone as the door sealed shut behind them. Darkness swallowed everything. For a moment there was only the sound of their breathing. The queen leaned against the cold wall, shaking. Elias lit a small flare. The red light revealed ancient carvings, stories of old queens, wars, and sacrifices. "So it's true," she whispered. "This place was built to protect the bloodline." Elias nodded. "Then it's the safest place for you right now." She looked at him, her eyes softer now. "And what about you?" "I'll manage," he said with a grin. Though his shoulder was bleeding again, they walked deeper into the passage. The air grew colder, filled with echoes of forgotten times. Water dripped from the ceiling. Every sound felt louder in the silence. After a while, they found a large chamber. In the center stood a cracked throne made of black stone. Old, rough, nothing like the shining crystal one she once sat on. The queen touched it gently. "My ancestors ruled from this place during the Great War. They hid here for years, waiting for peace." Elias looked around. "So history repeats," she gave a sad smile. "Perhaps it does." He sat down against a wall, closing his eyes for a second. "You should rest, Majesty." "And you?" she asked softly. "I'll watch," he said. She hesitated, then slowly removed her cloak and placed it over him. "You've done enough watching." Elias looked up, surprised. The queen turned away, pretending not to see his expression. Minutes passed. The fire from his flare flickered low. The queen sat near him, listening to the quiet heartbeat of the underground world. Finally, she spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "When my guards turned against me, I wasn't surprised. I always ruled through fear, but you stayed. Elias opened his eyes. Because someone had to. Why? She asked. He looked at her directly. Because I've seen enough good people die alone. I won't let that happen again. The Queen stared at him, a human, a soldier, bleeding, broken, and for the first time she felt safe. Truly safe. Then from deep within the tunnels a faint metallic sound echoed. Footsteps. Many of them. Elias immediately stood up, grabbing his weapon. The Queen whispered, "Impossible. No one knows this place." "Someone does now," he said, his voice low and sharp. They looked at each other. The silence broke into tension. The passage was no longer safe. Elias motioned her to hide behind the throne as the light of torches flickered in the distant tunnel. Shadows moved closer. He whispered, "Stay quiet." The Queen held her breath as the first voice called out, echoing through the dark. "Search every corner. The Queen must not escape again." Elias's hand tightened around his rifle. He whispered to himself, "So much for peace." And as the rebels' torches filled the chamber with orange light, the human stood tall again, the last wall between the Queen and the world that wanted her dead. The tunnel opened into darkness. Cold night air rushed in, smelling of rain and earth. Elias stepped out first, scanning the horizon with tired eyes. Above them, twin moons hung low, lighting a strange forest that shimmered faintly blue. The trees were tall and thin, glowing veins pulsing inside their trunks like living creatures. The Queen followed, her steps slow, her gown torn and dusty. She looked around with wonder and fear. "This is no ordinary forest," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Locals call it the Forest of Shadows. Few come back from here. Why?" she asked. "Because the forest remembers," he said simply. "It hides what it wants, and it shows what it must." His words hung heavy in the air. The Queen felt her heart tighten. It was as if the forest was breathing, listening to them. They moved quietly between the glowing trees. Strange whispers floated in the wind, soft and cold. Elias's boots sank into the damp ground, leaving deep marks. The Queen followed close behind, holding her arm where a small wound bled. At last they found an open space under a giant arch of roots. Elias dropped his gear and began setting up a small fire using broken branches. Sparks rose and danced before catching flame. The warm light made his face look older, his scars deeper. The Queen sat nearby, staring into the fire. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she broke the silence. "I never asked you why you joined my army." Elias poked the fire with a stick. "Because humans had no place in Sarathia. Serving the Queen was the only way to prove we were worth something." She looked at him with guilt. "And did I make you feel worth something?" He smiled faintly, eyes still on the flame. "Not exactly. But you gave me something better and a reason." She tilted her head. "A reason?" "To stand for something," he said. "Even when it hurts." For a moment the forest fell completely silent. The Queen felt the warmth of the fire on her face. In that light, Elias didn't look like a soldier anymore. He looked human, simple and honest. Then from the distance a long, echoing cry broke the silence. A strange low wail, half animal, half ghost. The Queen stiffened. "What was that?" Elias stood up slowly, listening. "Something's hunting. We're not alone." He grabbed his rifle and looked into the dark trees. The Queen followed his gaze but saw nothing, only shifting shadows. The fire crackled and the forest seemed to close in. Suddenly a soft movement, a figure between the trees. Then another. Dozens of glowing eyes appeared, watching them. "Stay behind me," Elias whispered. The Queen obeyed without a word. Out from the mist stepped creatures unlike any she had ever seen. Tall, thin, with translucent skin and glowing bones. They moved without sound, their bodies blending into the forest light. "They're not beasts," Elias murmured. "They're guardians." "Guardians?" she whispered. He nodded. "Old spirits of this forest. They protect what's buried here." One of the creatures moved closer, tilting its head at Elias. It didn't attack. It studied him. The Queen watched as he slowly lowered his weapon. "Elias," she said softly. "Don't." But he ignored her, taking one step forward. "We mean no harm," he said calmly. "We're only passing through." The creature stopped, then reached out a thin, glowing hand. It touched Elias's chest gently, right over his heart. A faint light spread across his armor. tracing his scars like golden lines. Then as quickly as it came, the creature pulled back and vanished into mist. The rest followed, fading into darkness one by one. The queen stared, speechless. What just happened? Elias sat back down, breathing heavily. They saw something. Maybe mercy, maybe pain. They didn't kill us, that's what matters. She sat beside him, still shaking. You spoke to them like they could understand. He gave a small laugh. Pain speaks all languages. The queen looked at him again, her eyes softer now. You're strange, human. Strange keeps me alive, he said. Hours passed. The forest grew quieter. The fire burned lower. The queen's eyelids grew heavy, but she forced herself to stay awake. Finally, Elias noticed. Sleep, he said. I'll keep watch. No, she replied softly. You've done enough, he frowned. Queens don't take orders from soldiers. Tonight, she said, a queen isn't here. Just a woman trying to survive. Elias said nothing. He only smiled faintly, turning his gaze toward the forest. Moments later, the queen's head tilted and rested lightly against his shoulder. He froze, unsure what to do, but didn't move away. Outside the circle of their firelight, something glowed in the dark, faint marks carved into the trees, forming a trail deeper into the forest. Elias noticed them but didn't wake her. He simply whispered to himself, Wherever this leads, I'll take her there. The fire flickered low. The two of them sat together, a fallen queen and a broken soldier, surrounded by ancient ghosts and glowing trees. Above them, the wind whispered like a lullaby, and the shadows watched silently, waiting for morning. Morning light filtered weakly through the forest canopy, painting the mist in pale gold. The fire had long gone cold. The queen awoke slowly, her head resting on Elias's shoulder. He was still sitting upright, his rifle across his knees, eyes open but distant, like a man who hadn't slept for years. She straightened quickly, embarrassed. Did you not sleep? He smiled faintly. Didn't need to. Old soldiers dream too much. The queen looked at him. The dark circles under his eyes, the blood dried on his sleeve, and felt a strange ache in her chest. She wanted to thank him, but words felt too small. Before she could speak, a sound broke the calm, the distant crunch of metal boots. Elias's head snapped toward the sound instantly. They've found us, he whispered. The queen's blood ran cold. Already, he nodded. They tracked us through the river, rebels. And someone else. They gathered their things quickly and began moving east. The forest seemed to darken as they walked. The sunlight vanished behind black trees and every step echoed like a warning. Then a voice. Cold. Familiar. Running again, Your Majesty? The queen froze. Elias turned sharply, rifle raised. From behind the trees stepped a tall alien in polished armor. General Corvin, once the queen's most trusted commander. His armor still bore the royal crest, though it had been scratched and burned. Her heart clenched. Corvin, she whispered. You betrayed me, he smirked. I saved myself. You ruled with pride and blindness. You made enemies out of allies. I simply chose the winning side. Elias took a step forward. Winning side? You slaughtered your own people. Corvin turned his cold eyes toward the human. Ah, the queen's pet soldier. You should have stayed in your cage. Elias raised his weapon. You talk too much. Corvin's smirk widened. Still the same. Always standing where you don't belong. Behind him, 10 rebels stepped out, weapons ready. The queen gripped Elias's arm. We can't win this fight, he whispered back, maybe not. But we can buy time. Corvin took a slow step closer. Give her up, human. Hand her over and I'll make you rich. A house, servants, even your own land. You'll never have to serve anyone again. The forest fell silent. Even the wind stopped. Elias looked down for a moment, then chuckled softly. You think I'd sell her? Corvin raised a brow. You're human. You all have a price. Elias's smile vanished. Not today. The queen's eyes widened as he lifted his rifle and fired first. The shot tore through the quiet morning, striking Corvin's shoulder armor. The rebels shouted and opened fire. Bullets and plasma bolts sliced through the forest, lighting the trees in flashes of red and blue. Elias pulled the queen behind a fallen log. Stay down! He returned fire with precision, each shot finding its mark. The rebels advanced fast, outnumbering them, surrounding their position. Corvin's voice echoed through the smoke. You can't win, human. You'll die for nothing. Elias reloaded calmly. I've died for worse reasons. The Queen watched him, bleeding, breathing heavily, eyes burning with determination. Something inside her broke. She grabbed a fallen rebel's blaster and fired at Corvin's men, her aim shaking but fierce. One fell, then another. Elias glanced at her, almost smiling. Didn't think you'd pick up a gun again. Don't thank me yet, she said, breathless. I'm aiming for your head next. He laughed softly. Fair. An explosion threw them both to the ground. Dirt and leaves flew through the air. Corvin advanced, his blade humming with blue light. Enough games. Elias pushed himself up, coughing blood. His rifle was broken. He looked around, saw a metal shard, and picked it up like a knife. The Queen stood beside him. You can't fight him alone. He didn't look at her. Then fight with me. Corvin rushed forward, his blade slashing through the air. Elias dodged narrowly, sparks flying as metal clashed. The Queen fired her blaster again, missing by inches. Corvin swung, the energy blade cutting through Elias's shoulder armor. He fell to one knee, gasping. Human. Corvin sneered. This is how loyalty ends. Elias's voice came out rough but steady. No. This is how legends begin. He lunged forward, driving the metal shard deep into Corvin's side. The traitor screamed, stumbling back, dropping his weapon. Elias grabbed the Queen's arm. Run! They ran through the smoke and trees, branches slapping their faces, feet pounding against the ground. Behind them, Corvin's angry roar echoed. You can't hide forever. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of a cliff. The forest stretched endlessly below, mist swirling like a sea of clouds. Elias looked down, breathing hard. If we jump, maybe we live. If we stay, we die. The Queen stared at him. You're insane. He smiled weakly. A little. Without waiting, he took her hand and leapt. For a moment, everything disappeared, sound, gravity, fear. Only wind and her heartbeat. Then cold water crashed around them as they plunged into a hidden river far below. They surfaced, gasping, coughing, clinging to each other as the current carried them away from the burning forest. The Queen looked at him, bleeding, exhausted, still holding her hand, and whispered, trembling, You could have let me go. He smiled faintly, eyes half closed. And break my promise? Never. As the river carried them into the unknown, the sun broke through the clouds. But in the shadows behind them, General Corvin rose again, bleeding but alive. His whisper carried through the wind. I will find you, human, and I will finish this. The river carried them for miles before it finally calmed. The Queen and Elias drifted to the shore, soaked and shivering. The forest above was gone. Now they were surrounded by steep rocks and fog. Elias dragged himself out of the water, then turned to help her. His hands trembled. The blood on his shoulder had darkened. You're hurt, she said, kneeling beside him. He tried to laugh. You noticed? When he removed his armor, she saw the wound. Deep, burned, and bleeding through torn flesh. His breathing was uneven. The Queen ripped a piece of her gown and pressed it against the wound, ignoring his protests. Stop, he muttered weakly. You're the Queen, you shouldn't. Be silent, she said softly, but with authority. You saved my life too many times. Let me return at once. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the wind and the water answered. Elias's eyes slowly closed. The Queen pressed harder to stop the bleeding. Stay awake, she whispered. That's an order. He smiled faintly. Now you sound like yourself again. Hours passed. The fog thickened. The Queen built a small fire beside the rocks, her hands shaking from exhaustion. She looked at the wounded man resting near the flames. His armor was cracked, his face pale. You should have left me, he murmured. And let the forest take you? She asked. Never. You're risking your crown for a dying soldier. I already lost my crown, she said quietly. What else can I lose? Elias opened his eyes and looked at her. You haven't lost your heart. The word struck her like an arrow. She turned away, pretending not to hear. But her heart beat faster. Before she could reply, a noise echoed through the canyon, metal clanking against stone. Elias's body tensed. They're here. How? She whispered. No one could have followed us through the river, Corvin, he said grimly. He's too stubborn to die. The Queen's eyes darkened. She rose to her feet, grabbing a blaster. Then we finish this. A shadow appeared through the fog. General Corvin stepped forward, armor dented, bleeding from his side, but still alive. His rage burning brighter than his pain. Behind him came 5 rebels, armed and silent. Well, look at this, he sneered. the runaway queen and her pet human hiding like thieves. The queen stood tall, though her hands trembled. You betrayed your world, Corvin. You betrayed me, Corvin smirked. You betrayed yourself. You ruled through fear. Fear always turns on its master. Elias coughed, pushing himself to his feet despite the pain. You talk too much. Corvin raised his sword. And you lived too long. He swung, a glowing arc of energy. But Elias caught the blade with his arm guard, sparks bursting around them. He groaned in pain but didn't let go. He shoved Corvin back, firing his rifle once, hitting one rebel in the chest. The queen fired next, her shot burning through the fog. A second rebel fell, but Corvin's sword came again, slicing through Elias's armor, knocking him to the ground. Elias! The queen screamed. Corvin kicked him aside and turned to her. He dies, Your Majesty. You die next. She lifted her blaster, but he was faster. He struck her arm and the weapon flew from her hand. She fell backward, hitting the ground hard. Corvin raised his blade for the final blow. But suddenly the air around them trembled. A strange light began to glow under the queen's skin. Her eyes turned bright gold. Corvin froze. What are you doing? The queen's voice was calm, almost peaceful. Something I swore I'd never do. She lifted her hands. The ground shook. The air shimmered. Ancient symbols burned across the rocks. A pulse of energy exploded outward, blinding everyone. The rebels screamed as their bodies turned to ash. Corvin staggered, clutching his chest. You're using the forbidden power. You'll kill yourself. The queen's voice echoed like thunder. If it saves him, it's worth it. Light burst from her body, wrapping around Elias, sealing his wounds. He gasped as his pain faded, wound replaced by warmth and life. No, Corvin shouted, charging forward. But the queen turned, her eyes blazing. Your war ends here, she whispered. A wave of golden fire surged from her hand, striking Corvin square in the chest. His scream echoed through the canyon before his body crumbled into dust. The light faded. The air grew still again. The queen fell to her knees, trembling, smoke rising from her skin. Her crown symbol glowed faintly on her forehead, then dimmed. Elias crawled to her side, panic in his eyes. Stop, you'll die. She smiled weakly. You're alive. That's enough. He shook his head. No, that's not how this ends. He lifted her into his arms. Her body was light, almost weightless. He pressed his forehead against hers. You saved me. Now it's my turn. He carried her through the ruins. Each step heavy, the fog parting before him. Behind them, the river sparkled with golden dust, the last trace of her magic. As dawn touched the cliffs, Elias whispered softly, Hold on, Your Majesty. Just a little longer. The queen's eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. Elias, yes? He said, her lips curved into the faintest smile. If I die, promise me something. Anything, he said. Live for both of us. Elias looked at her, voice breaking. You'll live too. I promise. And as the first light of day touched her face, he carried her higher into the mountains, a broken soldier and a dying queen, toward whatever fate waited beyond the clouds. The mountains glowed gold beneath the rising sun. Mist curled around the cliffs like ribbons of light. High above the valley, Elias carried the queen through the morning air, step by step, breath by breath. His armor was shattered, his body weak, but he didn't stop. Her head rested against his chest. Her skin was pale, her pulse faint. Every few moments her eyes fluttered open, catching glimpses of the sky she once ruled. You're safe now, Elias whispered. We're almost there, she smiled faintly. You said that before. And I'll keep saying it, he replied. He reached a flat ledge hidden behind the rocks. The wind here was softer and sunlight poured through cracks in the clouds. Gently he laid her down on a bed of moss and stone. Her breathing slowed, but her eyes remained on him. Calm, steady, royal even in weakness. You should rest, he said. She shook her head slowly. There is no rest for queens, he smiled sadly. Then rest as a woman. You've earned that much. Her lips curved faintly. You always speak like you know my soul. Elias looked away, staring at the horizon. Maybe I do. For a while neither spoke. The mountain wind carried silence between them. Below, the forest still burned, smoke rising like ghosts of everything they'd lost. Finally, the queen said, Elias, when I first met you, I thought you were nothing. Just another human soldier, but now, I see I was blind, he turned to her surprised. You weren't blind. You were just alone. She smiled, weak but real. And you changed that. Her fingers reached out, shaking, and touched his hand. You stood when everyone else ran. You believed when I had stopped believing myself. Elias's voice softened. I didn't protect the crown, Your Majesty. I protected the person wearing it. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Then promise me one thing. Anything. If I die, don't let the world forget who you are. Don't hide in the shadows. You carry my name, Elias, Sarathia's last loyal heart. He nodded slowly, unable to speak. His throat ached. He wanted to tell her she wouldn't die. He wanted to promise eternity. But the truth was there, fragile as morning mist. The Queen's breath grew slower. She looked at him again. Tell me, why did you never kneel? He smiled softly. Because loyalty doesn't need to bow. She laughed weakly, a sound like broken glass and melody. Then let that be remembered. The wind picked up. The sky turned brighter. The Queen's eyes closed slowly as the sunlight touched her face. Elias felt panic rise in his chest. No, stay with me, he whispered, shaking her gently. You promised. You said we'd live. She didn't answer. Tears fell down his face as he pressed his forehead to hers. You can't leave me now, not after everything. Then faintly her lips moved. I'm not leaving. I'm only waiting. And her body went still. Elias sat there for a long time, the fire of dawn surrounding them both. He didn't cry out. He just held her hand and whispered, You kept your promise. You saved us all. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. The smoke below slowly faded. When Elias finally stood, his eyes were clear. He looked down at her, the Queen of Sarathia, the woman who had changed everything, and placed her crown beside her. You wanted peace, he said softly. I'll make sure the world remembers that. He built a cairn from stones, marking her resting place at the edge of the cliff. Then he stood tall, his broken armor gleaming faintly in the sun. He turned toward the valley, toward the people who had betrayed her, Kyan, and whispered, The Queen lives through me. He began to walk down the mountain, carrying her banner across his shoulder. The fabric fluttered in the wind, torn, burned, but still shining. When he reached the foothills, villagers emerged from hiding. They saw the banner and fell silent. Some whispered her name. Others dropped to their knees. Elias raised the flag high. Your queen is gone, he said loudly, his voice echoing across the valley. But her will remains. Her peace remains. Her courage remains. The crowd began to weep. Some placed their hands over their hearts. The rebellion was broken, their shame heavy in the air. Elias looked at them one last time. Remember this day, he said. The day a human stood for your queen when no one else would. That night, under a sky full of stars, Elias sat beside a small fire near the river where it all began. The forest whispered softly around him. He closed his eyes and whispered, You said you'd wait. I'll keep walking until I find you again. And as the wind blew through the trees, he thought he heard her voice, light as air. Warm as sunrise. I'm proud of you, Elias. He smiled through his tears. And I'm still not kneeling, he whispered. The flames flickered and the stars reflected in his eyes. A soldier no longer, but a legend reborn.